7 after 8 o'clock. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program. You are tuned to News and Views on Salam Media. And our first guest on the morning is Zaakirah Vadi from Defend Our Democracy. We've had her on the show before in her new role. She used to be with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. She's now with Defend Our Democracy. For those of you who don't know that she's made the change, let's understand what they're all about. And then we're going to be talking about the Zondo Commission report 1 year on. Assalamu alaikum, Zaakirah. Welcome to the program.
Alaikum salam to Zaakirah for having me on air.
Okay, Zaakirah, I know you've been with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation for quite some time now. The change, who is Defend Our Democracy? What is your role there? How different are you from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation?
So, the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation was one of the founding organizations of what was then the Defend Our Democracy campaign. And this was in March 2021. You will recall it was the period where just around about the time when the former President Jacob Zuma was beginning to defy the Constitutional Court about him appearing before the Zondo Commission. What followed was his arrest, and then we had the July 2021 unrest in the country. So it's within that context that this particular campaign was formed, and also that this particular campaign has now launched as a civil society movement with the core aims of tackling corruption in state capture, countering political destabilization, and looking at the issues related to the elections and electoral reform as well. So that's the core work that we do centered around movement building. And it's now formally launched. There was an elective conference that took place just about a month ago. And it's really within this context that Defend Our Democracy is now a formalized movement on its own. So I think this is the kind of context of it. We maintain very strong links with the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, as we do with, I think, other civil society organizations who are in line with these areas of work as well.
The situation in the country, I think you guys are doing sterling work. All of these civil society movements are making voices heard. And even if there hasn't been much action, which we do not up to now, heads haven't rolled, the fact that voices are being heard is important enough. And I'm kind of wondering, does it not sometimes, just sometimes, make you feel, what's the point? We're putting in so much of hard work and effort, but the corruption and the dirty politics is still ongoing. Are we ever going to win this battle?
So I think heads have started to roll. We may not be aware of it because it's not necessarily the big names that we expect. But there have been recent arrests related to state capture. Yes, that prosecution in relation to the Nulani case didn't necessarily go ahead as the NPA would have liked. But I think that there was some effort in relation to it. And then there have been smaller cases of corruption or issues related to state capture in the energy sector, particularly in relation to ESCOM, where we have seen arrests being made. But the problem with the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment is that due to the scale of corruption and the scale of state capture, both state capture in the last era and state capture that continues in various forms today, in the scale of all of this, the one or two arrests that are being made from time to time don't seem to make a dent, both within the public perception about the capability of government to tackle state capture and corruption, and I think overall in stemming the rot and the continued sense that the country and the fiscus is being looted on a consistent basis. So while I think that there are significant headways being made, particularly by those within law enforcement agencies, it just simply isn't enough at this point to stem the tide.
Elections are around the corner. And I think different political parties are going to be pulling out every trick from the hat just to make their voices heard and to garner as much as the vote as they possibly can. Your thoughts on the upcoming elections? And we will go to the Zondo Commission in a minute or two, but whilst I have you online, let me pick your brain.
The next elections, which is provincial and national, is going to be extremely critical for the country in several ways. One is that we are getting, and this formal surveys that have now been done by the HSRC and others, pointing to low voter turnout. So in previous elections, we've seen a very steady decline of voter turnout on the day of election. And increasingly, as the voting population from 1994 gets older, those are the ones who have really registered and gone out to vote previously. And a newer crop of voters who are younger people are coming in. Those younger people are not necessarily registering to vote. And our call has been, and I think for many organizations will continue to be into this next period, that young people particularly must register to vote. In this election, it's going to be extremely important for newer voters to come out and vote because people have a perception that your vote doesn't make a difference. This is one of the first elections that I think at least some are beginning to speculate that the governing party may get under the halfway mark and may not be able to necessarily on its own form a majority. Therefore, anyone that you vote for, whether it be the governing party, whether it be a smaller party, whether it be some of the bigger opposition parties, every vote is going to count in these elections. And we've seen in cities like Johannesburg, for example, where there are coalition governments that are formed, where it's not just the big political parties that necessarily have a say. The smaller political parties tend to become kingmakers because they are needed for coalition purposes. So it's going to be a very interesting period in a run up to the 2024 elections. We want as many people to come out at this point to register to vote. Organizations will be encouraged in this next period to ensure that within the area where they are based, they send through elections observers to monitor the elections process and to commit to democracy, I think, in this way once again. So this next election cycle, I think, is something that we all have to keep an eye on.
Okay, we're going to go for an ad break in a minute or two, but let me put one more question to you, not related to the Zondo Commission. We just know, we do know that the ANC Youth League has just come out of an elective conference. Obviously, people are saying that that was a very smart move by the ANC because hopefully, by way of the Youth League, they're going to be able to or hope to garner the youth vote, those that are eligible to vote. What do you make of that elective conference?
Look, I don't want to go into the specifics of a political party. The Defend Our Democracy movement is non-politically aligned. I think that the fact that, and this is my own view, that the ANC has been able to hold this elective conference 8 years later, it's really since the time of the league's former head, Julius Malema, that it's been able to pull something like this off. It's an important indicator, I think, of where the party sees itself going. But similarly important will be over this next period to monitor what are the activities of other political parties. We know the EFF will be hosting their anniversary celebrations later this month. There's posters all over the highways and in different areas. And similarly, other political parties will be doing so. For the South African public, what's going to be important is that we are able to develop a set of criteria, a rubric very much like you have in school, to evaluate both political party manifestos. So what are political parties saying? Are there facts contained in those manifestos? Are they realistic or are they simply populist? So how do we evaluate political party messaging over this next period? And two, how do we evaluate the quality of the candidates that political parties are putting up? These elections will be the first where there may be independent candidates standing for particular provinces or nationally as well. How do we evaluate the quality of those independent candidates as well? And what's the yardstick to which we hold them accountable? And in every community, when there are community meetings that take place before the election period. What are the kinds of questions that we need to pose to political parties so that we begin to, I think, rather give critical analysis to the promises that may be made in this period rather than simply just agreeing with the kind of populist messaging that may be put out.
Shukran, I knew that you would rise to the occasion, and undoubtedly you did, because of course you are a chip of the block of obviously your dad Ismail Vadi and your brother Azar Vadi, alhamdulillah. Let's go for I couldn't resist that. I know you're a woman in your own right. And I'm sure you don't like to be, you don't like that association to be brought in, but I just had to say that.
So my sister and mother are often deeply offended because both of them are teachers and come from a teaching background. And they also they always want to know why they're not always mentioned. So I'll just take the opportunity to mention them as well.
Anyway, stand by. We're going to go for an ad break, and when we come back, we're going to be looking at the Zondo Commission, inshallah.
This is Salam Media.
There's no smell that takes me back to the comfort of my childhood than the smell of flaxseed oil being applied by my nani. Now I'm using Tib Blackseed in my own home to soothe sniffles and coughs, to help with digestion and immunity, and of course, as part of my beauty routine. After all these years, I've come to appreciate the wisdom in finding comfort and shifa in trusted treatments like Tib Blackseed. You can find Tib Blackseed at all leading pharmacies or find out more at blackseed.co.za.
Sponsor an orphan and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Ah, the kitchen, the heart of the home, where memories are made and celebrated. Our go-to place for those freshly stacked pancakes early in the morning or for that late-night snack munchies. We are in there together, cooking, eating and celebrating life together. Let's keep the kitchen a place that is shared by everyone, where we build stronger bonds and grow together. Sunfoil, Now We Cooking. Visit nowwecooking.co.za for recipes that everyone can help make.
When the perfect blend of stylish decor, exquisite halal cuisine, and warm hospitality come together, it could only mean Al Bayt Lodge, your true home away from home. Al Bayt is the ideal heaven for families, business people, and tourists with its 4-star family rooms and other luxurious facilities, conveniently situated close to Port Elizabeth Airport, the beach, and other amenities. Your stay will be truly unforgettable, as you'll be taking home lasting memories of the warm hospitality, the serenity and tranquility that Al Bayt has to offer. For reservations, call 041 583 6415 or visit www.albaytlodge.co.za.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
It is exactly 8:20 a.m. We're talking with Zaakirah Vadi. She is with Defend Our Democracy. We're now going to be looking at the Zondo Commission 1 year on. Will the recommendations be acted upon? Welcome back, Zaakirah. The all-important question. You guys are going to be holding a webinar. It is scheduled for the 11th of July. So talk to us about it, the thinking behind this, and the amazing speakers that you have on the webinar.
So we've got this webinar scheduled on the 11th of July. The 11th is the day that the African Union celebrates Anti-Corruption Day. We are usually familiar with Anti-Corruption Day being on the 9th of December. That's the international date. But this is the African Union date. And we thought it important to commemorate this day and really get speakers who will be able to give a bit of thinking and substance into why these recommendations perhaps have not been followed up 1 year on. So we've got lined up Paul Holden. He's recently launched a book, and that book is called Zondo at your fingertips, and it really begins to put into perspective just the scale of the Zondo Commission. If you open the first page of the book, it just speaks about the volumes of paper and of just the kind of technical storage that's required for the Zondo Commission files in totality and all of the evidence that was submitted before it. And he then unpacks the various recommendations within the different themes of the Zondo Commission. So in SOEs, what were the recommendations? In relation to Parliament, what were the recommendations that were made, for instance? The second speaker will be Firoz Kachalia, and Firoz Kachalia has recently been appointed as the head of the national advisory forum that has been put together by the presidency around tackling corruption. And it's quite a new body. It does include some members of civil society as well. And their role is really to implement a national action plan against corruption. And we want to get a sense from him if this plan and if their thinking aligns to the thinking of the Zondo Commission, whether there's any symbiosis between all that has been recommended in the Commission and what they are planning to advise the presidency to do, what's the scope of their work. And I think many are unaware of what they may be doing at this point in time. So that's the report back session. And I think lastly, the kind of questioning towards the annual probe, what should be the response of society in relation to these Zondo recommendations? So we now have a wonderful set of reports. There's been quite a lot of exposure that has taken place around the extent of state capture. And what do we now do about the systematic changes that need to unfold? And when these aren't implemented, what does society need to do to ensure that those responsible for their implementation actually begin to do so? And I think that's where we want to take the conversation going forward.
Let's understand Cynthia Stimple's role. She is the facilitator. She is a whistleblower. Her life was threatened as well. And I think she subsequently wrote a book too.
Yes.
Why Cynthia Stimple?
So Cynthia is now was recently elected onto Defend Our Democracy's National Committee as one of its members. And Cynthia will be chairing the session, but also comes with real the inside know-how of how state capture occurs based on her own experience as a whistleblower and the kind of targeting that she may have experienced and that many other whistleblowers experience within government or within business once they begin to bring these issues to the fore. So Cynthia comes with that knowledge. She's also, since being an active whistleblower, has tried to help other whistleblowers. She's formed an organization called Citizens of Conscience and is now part of the Whistleblower House as well. And they are doing very good work to try and help whistleblowers, irrespective of whether you're working for a very big government agency or you're just working in a local municipality and you need some advice on how to take forward your whistleblowing. And she's been playing a role in that regard. So I think she'll do a fantastic job just in terms of facilitating the conversation that will take place on the day.
Zaakirah, it's a year on since the Zondo Commission report was released to the public. And we know, as you have indicated as well, there are millions of pages of reference and to the Zondo Commission and lots and lots of information contained therein. I'm kind of wondering what is the expectations going forward? We know it has cost taxpayers over R1 billion for this commission to have been in place. What next? How do we, you've indicated as well that there are heads rolling in different areas of government regarding state capture, regarding corruption, etc., etc. But it's not the top dogs, is it? And I think the public are wanting to see a couple of top heads rolling for us to start believing that there is hope in South Africa. There is hope in the country. There is a future for us in South Africa.
Definitely. And I think this is one of the consistent arguments that is being put forward to the National Prosecuting Authority on a consistent basis, that we have to see, some of the key engineers of state capture begin to face some sort of accountability, and particularly those within the political sphere. And it's not just, there's been recently in Parliament, one of the members who were implicated in the report had a kind of a slap of the wrist, on the wrist, um, accountability mechanism imposed on him, for something that he had done. We don't want to see that sort of thing. We really are calling for orange overalls for those who are involved. And the NPA, I think, comes with its own argument, saying that the NPA doesn't really do the investigative work. The investigative work is really the job of the police services, those who are in the Hawks, for example, those who are involved in criminal intelligence. And those particular sectors, many of them have themselves been decimated by state capture and corruption. If we look at just the problems within the police service itself. So once a person is arrested and all of this investigative work is done, and that goes to the NPA, and the NPA has to decide whether to prosecute or to not prosecute and to pull together a watertight case. So they are working as part of a broader system. And that system, in some instances itself, has been really, I think, hammered over the last 10 to 15 years in our country. So I think that the public has an absolute right and should continue to call for orange overalls. But at the same time, I can well understand the kind of pressures that the NPA is working under. That doesn't mean, though, that we shouldn't be seeing some high-level arrests that take place.
Dr. Rampele has penned an opinion piece. I'm sure you are aware of it. She was very, very scathing in that opinion piece. She believes that Cyril Ramaphosa has failed us as a country by not calling out corrupt politicians. And perhaps he's not in a situation to do that because with the Phala scandal hanging over his own head. I'm not sure if you've seen the opinion piece. And if you haven't, then it's not fair for me to expect you to respond to it.
Look, I haven't read the piece, but I think just in terms of the general gist of the question, there are a few things to consider. One is that with these recommendations that the Zondo Commission has put forward, is that we should be able to get to a point that irrespective of who is in power, because the next elections, we don't know who's going to be the president of the country in a year's time. But what will be the systems to which that president will have to abide by, and that president will have to account to. And I'm going to give a simple example here. So it's the president's prerogative to appoint the head of the National Prosecuting Authority. As it stands, it's just the president has to decide who is the person. There'll be a few nominations that will take place, maybe an interview process, and then the president decides. In the last nomination process for the National Public Prosecutor, right, the president tried to ensure that those interviews that took place were made public. So everyone could watch what was taking place. There was a sense of transparency around it. The next president, whoever that may be, is not compelled to do that. So there doesn't have to be a sense of transparency about it. So what are the systems that need to be put in place so that all of these top positions within very critical institutions, the public has a say in how those appointments take place, and there's scrutiny over the individuals that are appointed to particular positions. And that's just one example. Another example would be one of the recommendations of the Commission is that there needs to be a particular committee in Parliament whose core work is simply focused on oversight over the president himself or herself, whoever the president may be. And that may well relate to our previous two incidences regarding presidents in this country, the Nkandla scandal and more recently the Phala scandal, for example. So had there been this committee in place, what perhaps could have been done differently in relation to those two incidences? And if in future there's the next president, what should be the role of this committee. We understand from a recent report by PMG, this is a civil society group working to monitor Parliament on a regular basis. We hear from them that Parliament has already instituted a range of working groups or working committees to look at these recommendations and to begin to implement them. But even internally in Parliament, there may be pushback from some MPs who don't want these recommendations to be implemented. So some of these processes may either be countered or may be stalled in some instances. But the thing is that this work is the kind of day-to-day work of Parliament. And apart from the few civil society organizations that are really monitoring it, the public really isn't aware of what is at play. The last thing is that the Zondo recommendation, as you've indicated, is extremely vast. It covers a whole range of different reports, several different state-owned entities. And it's sometimes extremely difficult to say, okay, with all of these problems, there's so many of them. So really, if there are 100 solutions that are being put forward, we're certainly not going to be able to achieve all. I think what we are calling for two things. One is that we do need to systemize the monitoring of the implementation of this. So there needs to be almost like a public tracking of what has been implemented, what still needs to be implemented, where there are potential threats, where some in political parties or others may want to kind of counter whatever is being put forward. And number two, there needs to be a public prioritization of these recommendations. So what are the top 5 recommendations that everyone, whether you're in the business sector, whether you're in labor, whether you are running a preschool in your community, or whether you are part of a public servant within government, what are the top 5 recommendations that everyone will be able to champion and hold government accountable to? And as we go into this election period and we're asking political parties about what they aim to do to tackle state capture and corruption, we want these top Zondo Commission recommendations to begin to be those that community people begin to ask their politicians about.
Zaakirah, we've run out of time, but my final question and a short answer to it, please, if you don't mind. On the flyer that's going around, the invitation of the webinar that's going to happen on the 11th of July, and it is open to everyone. You just need to RSVP and register. Well, RSVP via your registration, your Zoom registration. I'd like to read out the quote on your flyer. It says, and I quote, "I have said before that if another group of people were to do exactly what the Guptas did to pursue state capture, Parliament would still not be able to stop it." That was said by Raymond Zondo, unquote. Your thoughts?
Well, we've seen after what we term is the so-called period of state capture, that was the Zuma era, we've seen after that the COVID-19 PPE scandals unfold in very much the same way. And nothing could be done, or very little could be done at that time to stop it. So I think that the former Chief Justice certainly has a point, and that's what we should all be concerned about going forward.
Zaakirah Vadi, always a pleasure talking with you. Shukran so very much. Until the next time, as always, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam, Jazakallah.
It is exactly 8:35. News and views right here on Salam Media. Next is Leighton Beard from the AA to talk to us about that horrific road rage incident by the VIP unit, the VIP unit of the Deputy President of our country, Paul Mashatile. Shocking indeed. We're going to get the AA's thoughts on the issue.